Hello, everybody. Well, welcome to a Tuesday that actually is acting like a Monday, so maybe some of you forgot about this as I did. So fortunately, we have it all ready to go. And so I'm Dana Bastoni. I am currently a science writer in the Global Futures Laboratory, and I do a lot of proposal editing, and I'm actually going to start doing some manuscript editing. And so I can work with people who are in global futures. And my background is as a scientist and as a science writer. I've been here almost 5 years now, working on proposals with all the people mostly in sustainability. Anyway, so this is Introductory Proposal Workshop, Proposal Writing 2, The Secrets of My Magic Wand. And you will get some secrets pretty soon. Oh, that's not right. Never mind. This is me in the Canadian Rockies a couple summers ago, and it's going to show you that where we're going, which is with compliance. I mean, if you don't have a compliant proposal, it gets returned without review, and that's obviously a super terrible thing. I'm going to give you some writing tips, and we're going to talk a little bit about readability. So if you're online, LJ is manning the computer, and you can ask questions at any time, and we will address them. Also, since there are not an enormous number of people in the room, if you'd like to just shout out when you have an answer to a question, that'd be great. So, all right. So how do you know what to put into your grant proposal? Any ideas? Well, it is, see, that's you're like careening off into space. This is also in the Canadian Rockies. You're careening off into space because you don't know where you're going with it, but you have something that will help you, and that's called the RFP, or Request for Proposals. It has a lot of different names, but basically it's an agency or a foundation or somebody who's going to give out grant money will put out some kind of information on what you need to do to get that grant. Get grant proposal in the right, like I said, you got to be compliant. So it tells you how to write your proposal, what you need to put in it. So those are all the other names: solicitation, funding announcement, broad agency announcement, blah, blah, blah. Okay, request for applications. So this is what an RFP looks like. This is from National Science Foundation, NSF. And it's the Division of Environmental Biology, also called DEB. And that's basically just what it looks like. So it tells you some important things, like the due date. It also will say annually thereafter. So if NSF comes up with a new DEB, they will actually put up the top of that. When you look at it online, it'll say, you know, this has been switched to, and it'll give you a new number. The number actually suggests when the RFP was put out. So NSF 17512 was put out in 2017. And there may not be a new DEB now. It's just saying that January 23rd every year until there's a new one, that's your due date. Okay? This one actually has a preliminary proposal that you do. So you only do a short proposal, and then they tell you if you're welcome to submit a full proposal. And that's actually pretty nice, because then you don't have to do the enormous amount of work to put a full proposal together. You have to do a lot of it because you need to have it all really well thought out. Okay. So you need to learn the RFP. Each RFP is specific to a single call. So your one for coupled human and natural systems is going to be different from your one for the DEB. You have your deadlines are super important. It tells you what the funder wants. It tells you if you're eligible, and that's actually super important, because it might be that if you're on, it might say you can only be on 2 in one funding cycle. So you know, and that would be maybe even just as a co-PI or a senior personnel. So you want to be careful to read the eligibility to make sure you are eligible for that opportunity before you make the big mistake of putting a lot of effort into it and then finding out you're not eligible. Like I keep saying, compliance is super important, so it's going to tell you certain things. In the case of NSF, well, we'll go to that in a minute. They tell you specific rules on budget, so maybe travel is not allowed, or maybe travel is required. A lot of times I'll say, like, travel to a meeting once a year in DC is required to NSF headquarters. So you need to know all of that stuff when you put your budget together. It'll tell you all kinds of things about all the things you need to do that proposal. Okay, so with NSF, there is another document which applies to all of NSF for that year, and it's the PAPG. And we'll talk about that in a minute. If there is a discrepancy between the two, the PAPG and your RFP, the RFP takes precedence. So if the PAPG says it has to be 15 pages, but the RFP says 18 pages, you're going with the RFP. Does that make sense? Because that's a lot of acronyms. You guys okay with that? Okay, good. So this is the PAPG, so Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guides. This is for, we'll say, 2019. So all the proposals that are submitted under that PAPG end up having to be using that 2019 one as a guide. And they'll switch it in 2020. They'll have a new one come out probably in January, and they'll say, as of January 20th or whatever date they choose, you go with the PAPG from 2020. Okay? So you just have to follow that, but remember the RFP takes precedence over that. What is the worst mistake you can make when submitting a proposal? I've said this like 3 times now. Having it returned without review, and that's because it's non-compliant. So if you're supposed to have 1-inch margins all around and you have 1/2-inch margins, it gets returned without review. There's a computer at NSF that does this. Nobody even sees it. It just comes back to you. And a lot of times if you do it before the deadline, you will actually be able to resubmit. But if you're submitting it 10 minutes before the deadline, that's it, you're done. So all that work you put in for nothing. So that's why it's so important to look at the RFP and the PAPG in the case of NSF and whatever other documents you have for other funders. How do you know your proposal's compliant? Well, you use the RFP, you use the PAPG. So you should be familiar with that. And you can find it online. That was from 2017. There's 2019 one now. So, and also use your RA, your research, your advancement. Thank you, research advancement person. And that's the person who's helping you with your budget, but also is going to help you with guidelines for, like, oh my gosh, you forgot to put in your management plan. So the RA will say, look, you need a management plan. So they catch a lot of your mistakes. So be sure you talk with them as well when you're putting in a proposal. All right, compliance. That's the little rules you have to follow. And some of them seem really stupid, and maybe they are, but it's a way for NSF to be sure you, or whatever your funder is, to be sure that you're really looking at the documents that they put out for you. So what I recommend is to start doing it right. Don't start with 1/2-inch margins if you're going to need inch margins. Don't start with double space if you're going to need single space. Start with it right, so you never have to worry about it. And then you can spot check it as you go. Like if you have co-authors, they might change the spacing or something. So be sure that you're compliant. But I think just start right. So there's always a page limit for the federal funders anyway. Pretty much, I think any funder has some kind of page limit or word limit. Your font, there's also going to be a font, like in NSF, you have to use a certain size of font. They actually even tell you how many lines per inch you're allowed to have. We have certainly printed out stuff and looked at with a ruler to make sure it's okay. If you have things like formulas and equations and stuff, that makes it more complicated. Spacing is nearly always single. If it's double though, you need to do double. So margins are typically 1 inch, although NIH is 1/2 an inch. So it just depends. And there will be required sections with NSF. You need to have an intellectual merit section and a broader impact section in your narrative. You also need results from prior NSF support. So if you've had a prior NSF grant, that needs to go in there. So there's all these rules that are going to be in the PAPG or the RFP. And you also need supplementary documents. That would include bio sketches, data management plans, all kinds of different things. So like I said, they're checked for compliance. If the mistakes are found, it just comes back to you and it says not compliant. Penalty for non-compliance is return without review, and that can be really disheartening. We have not had one, but we don't want one in our group, for sure. All right, so what I suggest always when you're putting your package together is think about the 12-12-12 scenario. It's 12 midnight, the reviewer has been reading proposals for 12 hours, and yours is the 12th proposal that reviewer is going to read, okay? all these reviewers are your colleagues. You know, they're people that are on the panel. They're all busy. They're teaching classes. They're doing whatever they're doing. And so they're trying to get these proposals read in amongst all that other stuff. Maybe their kids are screaming. So you have to make it as easy for them as you can. And how do you do that? Well, it's like a pie in your face. Make it readable and accessible. Okay, that's really important. So I love this book, Joseph Williams, 10 Lessons in Style and Grace. Once we've assembled our ideas, formulated our claims, supported them with good reasons, and organized our text coherently, we still have to express our ideas clearly. So this is a ptarmigan up on the top of a mountain in the Canadian Rockies. You need to be sure that your text is going to be readable and accessible, so you're going to be able to see it. You don't want it obscured. If you're worried about predators, you do. All right. My favorite part of all this is the best thing ever regarding words. And I tell this to all my PIs, every word should do useful work. So if you have, say you have something like you put in laws and rules, maybe you don't need both those words, right? Maybe they mean the same thing. So you pick one. So every word, I mean, especially if you've got a really long proposal, which I'm working on right now, I have 21 pages when I need 18, you're looking at all of those little things. Every word should do useful work. So we're going to go into this a lot more. All right. So one of the things you can do, like when you're doing a proposal, you're editing, you're trying to get the pages down, you don't have to delete whole paragraphs. Sometimes what you need to do is just delete change some words on a line, and that moves another line up, and then you've gotten rid of one line, and over the course of a proposal, you might get it down to, you know, the size that you need. So use shorter words. So what would be, instead of anybody, all of you in the room, anybody have any ideas for what shorter words might be for some of these? How about immediately? That's a shorter word. Now, how about expeditious? Fast. Exactly. So accordingly, try so, facilitate, help, immediately, now, utilize, use, subsequently, then, expeditious, fast. Anybody have any favorite, you know, $2 words when, you know, a quarter word will do? There's plenty of them. All right, so use less complex words. This can not only save you space, it makes your proposal seem a lot more approachable. You don't need to use those words to make yourself seem smart. Your research will make you seem smart. The way you write it should be very clear. So how about enumerate? Any ideas? Like number, right? So remunerate, pay, liaise, meet, enumerate, list, corporation, firm, transformation, change. Any other ideas? Okay, so replace redundant words with simple. These are among my very favorites. Stated requirements. How do you make that simpler? You need stated requirements? Are they just requirements? Yeah. How about pre-planning? When do you plan? Do you post-plan? No, you always pre-plan. So you only need planning. New innovations. If something is an innovation, it's probably new. Mission critical is critical. Data items. Probably just data. End results. Where do your results don't come before? They usually come at the end. So these are all words that you can replace with much simpler words. And so as you're writing, just write. But as you go back and you edit what you've written, these are kinds of things to keep in mind, not only to make it shorter, like I said, but to make it clearer. All right. Replace bloated phrases with one word. Until such time as, just until. Have a need for, what would that be? Do you have a need for something, or do you just need it? Right? Make a decision to. Decide. Due to the fact that, because, in the event of, if, that's a really short word. are capable of, you can do it. I mean, I'm always taking those words out when I'm editing proposals. A large proportion of, or much, or many. Very rarely will a phrase like that be necessary in your proposal. All right, avoid using more words than you need. So what's an actual fact? Well, now we have alternative facts, but in the old days when we only had facts, you didn't need the word actual. So probably let's just use fact, and then if it's an alternative fact, you can use alternative. But so actual fact, blatantly obvious, it's just obvious, right? Critical juncture, it's critical. Critically important, each and every. Oh, I think, isn't each and every the story that like lawyers got paid by the word, so they started using extra words. So like each and every is a remnant from those days when lawyers got paid by the word. Few in number, well, what else would it be? Few in first discovered. You know, these are all pretty obvious. Mental attitude, where else is your attitude? Unless you're a ballet dancer, then this is an attitude. So anyway, there's any others that you like or don't like? Anybody online coming up with stuff? No? Very quiet group. Okay. So it's not always wrong to use long, complex words. You guys are in some kind of field, and there are long, complex words that are part of your field. And if you had to explain that word all the time, you would end up using way more words to do that than just to use the word that your field uses. So paleomagnetism, if I have to explain what paleomagnetism is, that's going to take a lot of words. So paleomagnetism is just like ancient magnetism that you can find in a rock or something. Very important in geology. Action potential, that's a word you need to have. Yes?
Oh, just a comment online was the word basically seems useless most of the time.
Basically would seem useless, yes. That's a good one. All right, so then my very favorite, pneumo, mono, ultra microscopic silico volcanosis. All right, so if you ingest volcanic ash, you can get this disease. And so that's the name of the disease. And if that's what you have, that's the name of it. So all the doctors would know that, probably not very many. All right, so these words are efficient. So if you're gonna say go around the globe, you can say circumnavigate. If you're writing a book for second graders, you might say go around the globe, but you're not, probably. Start your computer, you know, all these different things. A tinkling sound, my daughter's favorite word, and she even wrote a poem about it when she was in 5th grade, is tintinnabulation. So that just means a tinkling sound. So that's not always, you sometimes need to have complex words, and that's fine. So avoid nounification. So take a verb, a perfectly wonderful verb, and make it into a noun. So how do you do that? Instead of decide, make a decision. Okay, how about manage? Provide management. You don't need that. Conclude. Come to a conclusion. See this stuff in proposals all the time. Discuss. Have a discussion about. Examine. Conduct an examination of. Consider. Take into consideration. So you can see it. You'll see this in people's proposals, and you can make it that. If you're thinking about using one of those, think about using the verb instead. Okay? People do it because it sort of sounds more technical, but it just makes it confusing. Do not include claims, false or true. So do not say, my work is state of the art. My work is the best. My work is premier. It's world class. It's cutting edge. It's the very best. Don't say that in your proposal. Prove it. So you're not going to say it's state of the art. You're going to write something really great about your work, and then your reviewer is going to say, wow, that is the most state-of-the-art, innovative, premier, world-class research I have ever seen. Okay, but you're not going to say it. And there's very, very few exceptions to that. There are some. Sometimes you have to toot your own horn a little bit, often in some kind of a letter, but you prove it, you don't say it. So if you can stand on one hand, Don't tell me about it, prove it. Okay? Oh, one of my pettest pet peeves. This is probably not grammatically correct. Me, myself, and I. So fill in the blank. Barack, this is from a year ago. Barack, Beto, and X are going on safari. Who is that? Is that me, myself, or I? And how do you know? What would most people say? Most people would say me, right? Barack, Beto, and me are going on safari. A lot of people would say that. You would say I, and the reason you would do that is because you say I am going on safari. You don't say me am going on safari. So be careful about that. And people do it all the time. Drives me nuts. I have a coffee cup that says, I am silently correcting your grammar, and that is totally true. I mean, I am like up here, I'm always correcting people's grammar, and that's one of the places where I have to correct it a lot. Her thesis committee includes Dr. Crow, Dr. Punch, and I. A lot of people would say I, right? But her thesis committee includes me, right? So that would be correct. Lots of people say Jane and I when it's not actually correct. You have to take away the other people and just have it be you, and then see what would you do if it was just I or me. What would be correct in that sentence? And it's crazy how many very well-educated people make that mistake all the time. I wrote the manuscript myself. Oh, you're laughing. Is somebody commenting? Oh, okay. All right. Improper use of myself. People say I'm going. I can't think of anybody can think of an idea of when you misuse myself, because people do it all the time, and it doesn't make you sound smart. Well, it might, but not to me, because I'm silently correcting your grammar. So it doesn't make you sound smart. Like I said, get rid of the other actors in your sentence. So I'm going on safari. Her thesis committee includes me. Okay. I know it sounds crazy to you guys, but people make that mistake all the time. All right, so this is fun. I hope you're finding some mistakes in that. If you're not, you're in big trouble. Okay, passive voice. One of the things, I guess the last speaker talked about passive voice, and active voice, but we're going to talk about it a little bit here. This is when the object of the action is cast as the subject, and it de-emphasizes the actor, but highlights the object. So when would you use it? When you don't want to take responsibility. So, dinner was burned. I didn't burn dinner. Dinner was burned. When you don't want to assign responsibility, the homework wasn't completed goes around a lot better with your teenager than you didn't complete your homework. Okay? The actor is unknown, irrelevant, obvious, or unimportant. So the honeybees were kept in a humidified chamber. If you're writing a science paper, it doesn't matter that Joe Smith, our technician, kept the honeybees in the chamber. Even though that's active voice, you still don't need it. It's not information that's important in that context. Or the recipient is the main so carbohydrates are produced by green plants because you're looking at the carbohydrates being the most important part. Active voice. So this is the best part. The subject of the sentence is doing the action or being acted on. So if it's passive, you can add in by zombies. So the homework wasn't completed is passive, right? Because it could be completed by zombies. A user survey will be conducted biannually by zombies. So those are passive. If you can put by zombies in there or whatever you want, by cats. So you didn't complete your homework, that's active. You can tell that I had a rough time with my daughter in high school with all the homework examples. We will conduct a user survey biannually. So if you want to use active voice, that's how you're going to do it. Perspective. That's really important because you want to do the point of view that you really are trying, that's important for what you're writing. So if you're writing from a first person perspective, that's, I. So I or we are saving the world. I am saving the world. We are saving the world. Second person is from another point of view, another person's point of view, and that would be you're being told how to do something. So you should fix your marriage. That's your counselor telling you you should fix your marriage. That's second person. And you're all way too young to remember this, but back in the way olden days, Bill Clinton ran against Bob Dole for the presidency in the 90s. And Bob Dole had this really weird habit of referring to himself as Bob Dole. So the third person's from a narrative point of view. So he would say, this is a direct quote, if you had to leave your children with Bob Dole or Bill Clinton, I think you'd probably leave them with Bob Dole, said Bob Dole. You don't really want to do that. So be careful with that as well. So here we go. This is a review. First person, I, me, mine, myself, we, us, our. Second person, you, your, yours, yourself, yourselves. Third person, he, him, all that stuff. Okay? They is now comment. So the intellectual merit. The broad aims of this project are to analyze the impact of dogs on the homeless population. To achieve this, you could say the literature on dogs will be studied, but that would make it passive voice. That would make it bad. So to achieve this, we will study the literature on dogs. That makes it much better. Be careful, though, in some things, some proposals, you're not allowed to use first person. I have a question for you. It no longer says you can't use first person in NSF in the summary. Is that true?
I haven't checked it.
I've looked and looked and looked, and I haven't been able to find it. So anyway, it used to be that you couldn't use first person in the project summary for NSF, and they don't say that anymore, so I'm not sure.
I did say in the last presentation that is the exception to the rule, that we advise you to do third person for the summary.
Okay,
So
and I
we'll have to
still,
update our presentation now.
well, I don't know for sure. Anyway, we'll have to ask. I actually did email NSF and never heard back. So anyway, so be careful. Sometimes it's usually better to use first person. Sometimes you can't. And it's usually better to use active voice. Sometimes you can't. Right. Be consistent. I see this all the time in proposals. I even do it when I write stuff. If you're going to capitalize something in one place, capitalize it everywhere. If you're going to use a certain kind of punctuation, be sure you use it everywhere. So is it postdoctoral researcher, or does it have a dash, or is it 2 words, or is it postdoc? Postdoc can be used like maybe later on, but the first time you use it, you want it. So which one would be preferable? All of them are used. Just be sure that you refer to it the same way all through, okay? Capitalization. So proper nouns are capitalized, right? So the Grand Canyon, which is a proper noun for a place, is a very grand canyon, right? That's a description of it. That's not its name in that context. So be careful that when you're going through your thing, you're always capitalizing Grand Canyon. Sometimes you might want to do like grand, but then canyon, not capitalized. Be careful that you're always being consistent and you're always doing it correctly. In that case, Grand Canyon is all the proper noun, and so you have to capitalize both of those. All right, so we have the Julianne Wrigley Global Institute of Sustainability. That is all capitalized because that's the proper name of that institute. The Department of Psychology. So if you said the psychology department is cool, that's not capitalized because that psychology department is not its name. Its name is Department of Psychology. Okay, so that helps you to decide. If you're going to say the Mississippi River, lots of people don't capitalize river, but technically, yes, you should because that's the proper name of the river, Mississippi River. Okay, any questions? Okay. Deleting redundancy. So when you're editing your work after you've written it all, you're going to find a lot of things that you can delete. So be careful of words that are repeated in adjacent sentences. Sometimes I don't even understand what I'm editing, like if it's something in engineering or something, I don't understand it very well. But if I see words in adjacent sentences, I can combine those sentences and delete some of those words. So you can change words, delete words. So here's a very simple example. Tom didn't eat his piece of pie. I got a spoon and ate Tom's piece of pie. All right, what can you say instead? Tom didn't eat his piece of pie, so I got a spoon and ate it. Okay? Or Tom didn't eat his pie, so I ate it. Does it matter if you say you ate it with a spoon? It might. I mean, obviously not in this example, but it might. You would want to leave that in, and you have to evaluate everything that you're editing to to be sure that you don't need those words. So leaving out unnecessary information. Out of 62 samples, 40 tested positive and 22 were not positive. So what can you delete? Well, probably if somebody's reading a sentence like that, they can figure out that if 40 were positive, 22 were not. If there was, so when would you need it? What if it was 40 tested positive, 20 were not positive, and 2 failed? Then in that case, that's important information. So you have to evaluate everything. Okay. Again, you guys are writing technical stuff, so this doesn't necessarily apply entirely, but it does apply in a certain way. So I just wrote a proposal, and it was these economic models, and these sentences go on for like a page, and I read the sentence very, very carefully, and it's all grammatically correct, but it's too long. So be careful about, you know, if you how long your sentences are, because your reader is going to get lost, they're going to get annoyed. Remember the 12, 12, 12. If they have to go through every single sentence and be very, very careful reading it, they're going to get annoyed. So you don't want to do that to readers. So here we go. We have, so, and again, you're dealing with an educated audience. So 1 to 14 words understood by 90 to 100% of the readers, but you know, you're dealing with a more educated group. After 14 words, it drops. 44 words is understood by less than 10%. So that economics proposal I was reading, yeah, well, maybe the reader, maybe the panel people are all in that less than 10%. So here, go ahead and read that. You can see, we'll talk in a minute about what the readability score is, but go ahead and read that and see what you think of it. Do you understand it? Yeah, it's pretty understandable. It's 19th grade, right? That's what it's saying. The readability is saying it's 19th grade because it's really, really long. So you probably want to avoid that, particularly if you're actually dealing with, you know, clinicians and stuff like that. So how do you simplify it? Well, you can divide it into smaller sentences, and I sometimes do that. I will actually break up a long sentence and then work on each part of it and then put it back together, because that's a lot easier. So divide it into smaller sentences. Provider-based clinic, I don't want to read it. All right, second part, you can get rid of some words. And then you simplify the whole thing, and you can put it back together. So you can also break up the text with bullet points, and that's one of the things on this economics proposal I suggest is in a couple, you know, maybe once in a while, break up a paragraph and put in some bullet points, just because what you get a proposal, it's just this wall of words. And so, you know, just making breakups like that can be actually useful. It also makes it a lot easier to understand, because when you're reading it, you kind of say, okay, bullet point, and you look quickly, oh, I get that. Next bullet point, oh, I get that. Whereas in a paragraph, you just kind of get lost. So don't do it with every paragraph. That would be awful. But once in a while, throw in something like that. So you can clean up the text. You can see there that in this model, this reduces, it allows for all that stuff, get rid of it. So look at what that looks like now. And that readability is 10th grade, which is probably a lot easier for most people to read. The newspapers are written mostly 8th grade. So even that is a little bit more than like a newspaper. Okay, so does that look better? Good. Okay. So here's a more scientific example. Go ahead and read it. I don't understand it at all. Hopefully maybe one of you do. Okay, so you can revise it by getting rid of some words, combining some things. There's one revision and there's the other revision. So go ahead and take a look at this and see how I did that. So for those of you who understand that, does the second example still say what it's supposed to say and say it much more simply?
question just about word choice. So accelerated and efficient. I find myself often using efficient with another word, and sometimes I question if I'm using another word that's just repeating
Then
something.
don't use it.
So in this case, do you feel acceleration and isn't efficiency something that is accelerated to become more efficient?
I had the same response and for pro-efficient, because I think if you look at it's what she's done is taken she's taken inefficient out in the top example and kept efficient in the second one. But I think efficient in the molecular biology you have it's both sufficient and necessary, right? So efficient might be a key word used in this field. That was the response I had. I said perhaps efficient might be
Means something.
a valuable term in this context. Don't know, but accelerate I think is you could see them as
I wouldn't say them as the same thing.
Yeah, but specific to the field, right? So you'll have certain words that are keyed, and that was the response I had. In your case, you might be overusing the word, but in this case, I think I was under the impression that might be keyed to the field.
Right. That's it. So say you have a friend who wants you to edit something for them, and you don't know their field. I often want. A lot of times I'm not from the field where I'm getting proposals, and I will change something and then make a comment and say, I changed this to make it shorter, but be sure I didn't change the meaning. Because, sometimes if I give a proposal back to somebody and they've got to get it done and turned in, they might not see that unless I mark it. So, all right, so the Flesch-Kincaid readability scores. It looks at the number of words, it looks at the word in the sentence, it looks at short versus long words. So you can play with this thing, and that's the equation they use. You don't need to know that. Have any of you used the Flesch-Kincaid readability? None of the three of you, okay. So how do you get to it? Well, you're in Word, and you go to File, Options, Proofing, Show Readability Statistics. You say, okay. Review, and then run spell check, and it gives you the readability statistics. And back when I was a freelance writer, I did a lot of writing for high school or middle school audiences, and I was using that thing all the time. And it's kind of fun. You can play with it. So like if you're saying, like say you use a few words like go around the globe, but then you change it to circumnavigate, it changes the readability score. So you have to make a decision on, do I want the readability score to be, so that it's better for a lower audience, or do you want to be more efficient with your words? So it's kind of fun. I don't use it anymore because I'm dealing with, we're all dealing with faculty. But
one option to use this, I love this because once you click it on, it always shows up when you do word count. So when you're doing abstracts and you're doing lay abstracts, and you have to hit a word number or a character number, then you can also automatically get the readability score. And so if you create, in some instances, your funder will ask for a lay abstract and a technical abstract. I think like Picori does that. And so you might, once you write that technical abstract, you can mess with this and rewrite your lay abstract to get it to that very accessible readability score. And then I think NSF also, once you get to award, when you're notified of award for NSF, you can rewrite your abstract so it's a little bit more digestible to the public audience, to a public, and that's what they'll post on the NSF awards database. That's also a very useful tool to make sure it's kind of not necessarily, it just makes it more accessible, not necessarily dumbing it down, but more accessible.
right,
Because you're still giving them the core deliverable of your award or your proposal.
right. Yeah, it's a good use of it.
And I will credit you for showing me how to do this.
Okay.
And I love this tool.
Great. So it does have uses, even in academia. There are other tools that you can use. They give you a lot more information. You don't need them. They cost money sometimes. So this is what it looks like. So this is this paragraph, and this is what it looks like. So it gives you the grade level with 16th grade, which might not be bad for your audience. Tells you the words percents, tells you all of these different things. So go ahead and read this sentence. Is that, you can understand that pretty well, right? It doesn't have super long words. Few. All right, so that was from a proposal that I edited, this one, and I thought it was okay. Here's a proposal that I did about a year ago. Do you like that paragraph? Is it okay? Can you make it better? So go ahead and, so that was it. That's that paragraph, and it's grade level 20. Pretty high. And then I changed it. So does that look a little better, the one on the right? 15th grade, still high, but that's okay. Your audience is probably capable of reading that. And like I said, if you add in one really long, crazy word, it's going to change the grade level readability. So be careful. But sometimes I will take out words if I'm doing grade level and put in, like if it's in there, just putting cat. So then it can read it, you know, a little more objectively.
What's a target grade score?
What do you think?
I think it depends on what you're trying to achieve. Like if this is the entry into a method section, your method section is horribly complex. I don't want you to decrease the grade level of your method section, right? I want you to be technical and complicated.
Right.
But I do want to say why it's important, and that's an accessible paragraph.
Right. Well,
It's all
again, it depends on your audience.
Yeah.
So say you're writing to NSF and you're a molecular biologist and all your panel people are going to be molecular biologists. Go nuts, right? What if you're doing it to a foundation and the people reading it are going to be reasonably intelligent, but they don't have any idea about your field? Well, then I would not dumb it down, but make it more accessible. So it really depends. And then like she said, like a lot of times, it's really funny, I don't know if you found this, but when I edit proposals, the method section is often very well written because they just get right to it. Like they're just like, we did X, Y, Z, and I very rarely have to make any edits in a method section, or I might get rid of a few words. But for some reason that, like thinking like that is easier for people. I mean, I guess that's your day-to-day, you're using these methods. It's when you're trying to put it into a larger context and something where you start running into some problems. But does that make sense? Anything to add?
You can, if you look at the original, so part of this series of workshops has you talking about the awards and looking at who your reviewers are. So I just go back and remember your audience is key.
Right.
That's a good point.
With anything you write. Like when I said, like I used to write for middle school, I mean, obviously that's a totally different audience from the proposals that I work on now. Okay, what about that? Make your proposal easy to understand and read. I made that as uneasy to understand and read as possible with that crazy font. Break up the text with figures, flowcharts, tables, bullet lists, etc. They just want to write words. I mean, they amaze my people. They really just want to write words. They have very few figures a lot of times. Like that economics one I did the other day, I had 2 figures in 18 pages. And I suggested, because there's not a whole lot of time, I said, if you can, add a few figures. Like, and then there was one I did where she's doing work on whales. And I said, well, just like they identify whales by looking at, by their tails and like the flutes on their tails. So put in a picture, you know, just to break it up a little bit. So, you know, try to do anything like that. A bullet list, sometimes you can put like a box and like just, like say you had themes. And so theme 1, you're just going to maybe put a gray box. Theme 2, a little, you know, just something to break it up. That makes it a lot easier to read. Orient viewers with headings and subheadings. And not only that, be sure you're being consistent. So a lot of times, I just did one the other day. I took out all the text and just left the headings. It was like gobbledygook. Nothing matched. So be sure that you understand in your head, and also put on a piece of paper or another document what your headings and subheadings are, because I can't tell you how many times I see a proposal and it doesn't make sense. You've got theme 1 might be bolded and italicized, and theme 2 is just italicized, and theme, you know, so just be careful that you're being consistent all the way through. And also be sure you use them. I know it takes up a little bit of space, but it really helps your reader to orient. Judiciously use bold, italics, underlining. Lots of people don't like underlining at all. I'm not entirely sure why, but just be really careful how you use it. I tend to use italics more and sometimes bold. If you need underlining, I think it's okay. No tiny fonts. Oh, in NSF, we get people who, you know, they want to make their figure fit in, right? So they make it super, super small. And they've got this little teeny figure caption. And first of all, it's not compliant to have a figure caption that is any, for NSF, different for different funders, that is any smaller than the size of your text. In the figure, there's no rule except it has to be legible. So when you're looking at it on your computer, and you know, my eyes are bad enough, I've got it blown up 200%. Yeah, I can read it, but be sure that you go back down to 100%, or better yet, if you have a question, print that page out and look at it. You don't know for sure if your reviewer is going to look at it on a computer or print it out. Probably a lot of the younger reviewers are going to do it on the computer. Maybe some older people like to print it out. So just be sure that it's always legible. Limit jargon, acronyms, overly complex sentences. So you have to use jargon if that's used in your field, like paleomagnetism. Acronyms are sometimes really useful if you're in a certain field like socioeconomic status, SES. I get that a lot in proposals I read. Just be sure that the first time you use it, you define it. And then go ahead and use it all the way through. If you use it in the first 3 pages, then you don't use it for another 12, you might want to define it again the next time you use it. So just be careful about overusing acronyms. You don't want a sentence that's got 5 in it. But using them is not a bad idea, particularly if it's used in your field. Okay. All right, what do you think of that? That's in Latin, so I don't expect you to understand it. But what do you think of that? How do you feel about that? Does that make you want to read the proposal? That's the first page of a project description. Do you want to read that proposal? No, because it's in Latin. But otherwise, you don't want to read it anyway. How about that? Does that look better? That's still in Latin. But it helps a lot to have a figure. It helps a lot to have some subheadings. And it's consistent. So the equal important subheadings are the same. The top is different because that's a different, you know, level of section. Okay? That looks a lot better. And if you're the reviewer, you're going to be a lot happier to see that page. All right, so just a little bit of review. How do you wave the magic wand? Shorten words, shorten sentences, improve readability, play around with that flesh and fade. It's kind of fun, like I said. Give it to somebody else also. That's always really useful. All right, take home messages. Active voice is better than passive voice most of the time. Specific is better than general most of the time. So you have 20 5th grade students. You just don't say we had a bunch of students. We had 20 5th grade students. All right, fewer and simpler words. So you want to be sure that you're not using so much jargon, not so much terminology. You want to be sure that everything is clear. Future tense is better than conditional. I take that stuff out all the time. Tone, be collaborative, confident, authoritative, but don't brag unless you are, don't brag, but show them how great you are. Don't tell them how great you are, okay? That's one of the references that I used, and that's one of my favorite quotes. Perfection is an admirable goal, but it is the enemy of done. I live with a husband and a daughter who are perfectionists, and I can tell you, perfection is the enemy of done. You have to decide what's good enough, which is really, it's high, definitely high, but it doesn't need to be perfect. And especially with proposals at some point, and if there's no deadline, NSF's going a lot now to no deadline, oh, you can dink around with a proposal for a year. I mean, I can guarantee you that anytime you look at a proposal, you will find a mistake. And you could do that probably every day for a year and continue to find a mistake. So don't do that. just set your bar high enough and then meet that and don't worry about perfection. So that is all I have to say. Any questions, either here or online? LJ, anybody questions? Okay, well, okay. I hope you enjoy your nice short week. Oh, you do have a question.
Yeah, so how do you get toward, good enough is different for each person. And when collaborating with many people, it can be very difficult to convince others something is good enough.
Yes, well, that as the PI, that's the job of the PI in most instances to
Yes,
help with that.
it's difficult.
And that's really management
Yes,
as much as anything. So if you have a proposal manager who's working with you, maybe that person can kind of help with it. But as a PI, that's something you have to deal with. And maybe sometimes you just have to set a deadline and say, just send me what you have. And then you, as the PI, you can edit it. Or you can ask them to do certain things like, well, I need a little more explanation here, but just, getting people to stick with deadlines is really hard. And you need to build in time to be able to work with their stuff. I don't know if you're ever going to convince somebody not to be a perfectionist. Hasn't worked in my family. Any other questions? No? All right.
I will just point out one thing is that we do have, and for those of you online, this is Faye, if you have interest in proposal editing and don't have that locally available resource, we do have